Running the floor, Embiid stuffs it.
Harden for three. James Harden with his second triple.
What's up, guys? Welcome back to another episode of the Pick Swap Podcast. We are entering draft season. I guess we're fully in swing of draft season. We're coming up on the draft. So we know Sean's excited. So today we're with Sean. We're also joined by Ryan Coyle, who's a part of the Beef Up Front podcast that's joined us recently. So Ryan, how you doing, brother?
Good. Excited to be here. Great week. This is where we start to see, I feel like everybody's projected to every team. So it's kind of good to get all that nonsense out of the way and hopefully, focus in on some of these top tier guys.
Yeah, absolutely. And Sean is in full swing right now. This is his favorite time of the year. So Sean, how are you feeling right now?
Yeah, man, I feel like I can't eat, sleep, or breathe without thinking of a draft prospect right now. So can't complain. Favorite time of year for sure. So I'm excited to get into all these guys. And it looks like the Sixers kind of picture of targets is starting to get painted a little clearer. So excited to dive into all these guys.
Yeah, absolutely. I did a lot today. Today was my kind of refining moments of looking at these guys, and I'm really intrigued to see who you guys like the best, because I think Sean and I know you a little bit a lot better than I know Ryan, so I'm hoping that we at least have some similar things here, but I'm interested to see what you guys pick. So what we're going to do is we're going to go through some guys. We have a strong list of guys that are potentially going to be there at the 23rd pick. We're not going to rank them or anything. We're really just going to go through and talk about what we like and what we don't like. So EJ Liddell was the first guy that you sent me, Sean. Older guy, senior out of Ohio State, has been, teetered with the draft last year, decided to go back to Ohio State. So how are you feeling about EJ Liddell? Tell me what you like and what you don't like.
Yeah, I'm a big EJ Liddell fan. 6'7", 21 years old, 19.4 points, 7.9 rebounds, 2.5 assists, 2.6 blocks, shot 37.4% from three. I think he projects great as a modern day stretch four. A super high character guy. I love the storyline of him just going to the draft last year, not getting any guarantee, and just going back and improving on just pretty much every asset of his game. So very cool to watch him work. Super high motor, guy that straight up grinds. He's going to be a problem defensively. I love the way he rebounds and protects the rim. I think that would be an awesome asset to add next to Joel Embiid. It's a pretty common name amongst the Sixers kind of draft talk on Twitter and everywhere, but I think it makes a ton of sense. I think he would open things up for the lineups in ways that would be super beneficial. I think he could even play a little small ball five at times, and I love him. I think he would add a lot to the team. He's pretty high on my list.
Brian, how are you, buddy?
I'm right there with you. If we are able to get Liddell, I'd be doing backflips. I think he deserves to be late lottery to the early 20s at the latest, pick 20. I think he's one of the guys I probably put in the top 5 of most ready to make an instant impact in the NBA. Like you were kind of saying, Sean, improved everything this last year of college. He's a guy who's just gotten better and better over his time there. He shot only 19% as a freshman from three. He got that all the way up to 37% this year. So he's a guy who we've seen put in the work and get better. And like you said, Sean, maybe even be able to play a little bit of small ball five. I saw average 2.5 blocks per game. He really reminds me of kind of Herb Jones coming out last year from Alabama, where really successful college player. And then he's just not the world-class athlete, doesn't really have that much more potential to tap into, but he's a really solid player and he's going to be able to produce from day one in the NBA. So if we're able to get him, he can slide in there and play a lot of the four for us, and especially if we're getting rid of Tobias Harris, maybe bring in another guard. I think he could be a guy that slides right into the starting lineup.
Yeah, I liked a lot of what you said there, Ryan. I think very specifically it's the fit. You got to love what he does defensively. Grit guy. A lot of people talk about his age. I think that's actually a real plus in this situation. A lot of guys in the draft, if they get a little bit older, the one and done phenomenon that happened has kind of pushed this type of archetype of player, out of the high touts of the draft. So I like EJ Liddell exactly for the reason that he fits seamlessly into this roster and this rotation. He's eating up wing minutes as we speak. The second he puts on a Sixers jersey, he's eating up on those minutes. So I think the most important thing with this pick, and it's something we'll talk about throughout this podcast, is it is the fit. I think a lot of this pick really is there are some good options in these role player positions later in this first round. It's really about who they get and how they fit. So I think EJ Liddell, when you look at what he does on both the offensive and defensive end, he fits really nicely with, how he projects into potentially even the starting lineup, like you said, Ryan. So I like what both of you guys said, and I'm pretty high on EJ Liddell as well.
Yeah, to jump in real quick, James, kind of to touch on what you said there, that's something I think is pretty unique about this draft class. And one of the reasons I'm pretty against kind of trading the pick for just like a win now veteran. I think like there's a lot of guys in here who are checking the exact boxes the Sixers are looking for. And I'm not necessarily always on board with like the pick for fit kind of selection, but there's so many guys here that fit what they need that there's like bound to be guys on the board that's exactly what they're looking for. And we're talking about when traditionally it's kind of like the 19-year-olds and guys that are raw. There's a whole bunch of like 21-year-olds that are further in their developmental process right in this range. So I think it's unique about this draft class, and it makes me like really believe the Sixers should be careful about trading out of it for no reason.
Yeah, I think so as well. I know you and I had talked about that before, Sean. It's a weird spot that they're in, but I think it's almost the perfect draft for the Sixers to be doing what they're doing. They have a few clear holes that they can really patch up with a guy like, EJ Liddell specifically, or, some other guys on this list. They have the ability to get a guy that not only can help them now, but build onto this young core that they have and move forward with it. So the next guy that we have, and this is a guy I don't know if I'm going to be as high on, but Jalen Williams.
Okay. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'm not as high on Jalen Williams as I think a lot of people. Intriguing prospect for sure. I mean, 6'6", 7'2" wingspan, 21 years old, coming out of Santa Clara. Averaged 18 points, 4.4 rebounds, 4.2 assists, 1.2 steals, and shot 39.6% from three this year. He's had kind of an up and down career there. It really took him until his third year this season where he kind of established himself as like a legitimate NBA prospect. That to me is a concern just based on obviously not playing the highest level of competition at Santa Clara. He was very ball dominant in his role there, which will not be his NBA role the way it projects, but he has all the physical frame that you look for. The wingspan's crazy. He's got Kawhi-sized hands. He's all his measurables at the combine were pretty ridiculous, which is one of the major reasons why we've seen him kind of shoot up draft boards. This was a guy who was originally looking as kind of a mid-second round pick who's climbed all the way up to the mid-first round. I mean, you can't go wrong with picking him if he's there at 23. I think you have to for the Sixers at this point. The creation ability is intriguing to me. He's a guy comfortable with the ball in his hands, comfortable putting it on the floor. He also has a tattoo of the Iverson step over on his leg, which upgraded him a little bit in my mind for sure. So I like Jalen Williams. I wouldn't be that mad. There's a Jalen Williams out of Arkansas, who I really like as well. So for me, I have to say he might be my second favorite Jalen Williams in the draft, but you can't go wrong with taking him at 23.
Yeah, you have to in today's NBA for a wing. You have to be able to shoot and you have to be able to defend. And when you look at him, like you said with Sean, with his measurables, he's got that wingspan. And he got better at shooting. He shot 39% from three this year, 80% from the line. So he might even be able to increase that 3-point percentage a little bit. And like you were saying as well with the creation, 4.2 assists per game for a wing at his size. If he can put the ball on the floor and create for others, because the Sixers don't really have a wing right now that can do that. Even if he's a guy who's able to get the rebound and start the break himself, I think that's something that the Sixers don't really have on this roster with their wings. With when you look at like a Danny Green or Georges Niang, someone like that. So I think that's another good potential fit for Philadelphia.
Yeah, I mean, I think the reason I'm not so high on Jalen Williams is the fact that he flourished in a role as a ball handler. He talked a lot about the pick and roll passing, the creativity in that sense. They just don't have a lot of. There's not that many touches to go around, especially as a dominant ball handler in a half-court offense. It's just not going to happen very often with this team. And kind of like looking at what we said before, it's going to come down to fit. Him as a player, I like him a lot. He's a really interesting prospect. You talk about the length, the ability to guard 1 through 3. He lacks a little bit of physicality, a little bit, thin in that sense. So he doesn't flourish as a switchable defender down to the 3s and 4s, but I think him as a player, really intriguing, really good prospect. I just don't love the fit there, and I don't know that they're in a position to take that guy, going forward. I think they want to win now guy. So that's my take on it. I think he's a really good player. Just don't love the fit.
Yeah, I think he's more polished than we're giving him credit for. I mean, it's tough because of kind of the shift from ball dominant to being more of a complementary piece is every player handles a little differently. He is a very good cutter, which is appealing. Once again, I think he's probably off the board before the Sixers, so I think that they're not going to have a chance to make this choice, but I do agree with kind of the theme we're going with.
Yeah, and what we're saying about like the overall kind of fit, like the Sixers, like I think if you look at them, they have like a window. If they're going to roll with this core of Tobias, Embiid, Maxey and Harden. I think they have like a 3-year window, like at most, if they're going to roll with this core to win a title. And this guy, I think, still might need a little bit more development. That's why there's a few more guys on this list, kind of like I was saying with E.J. Liddell, where I think they need a guy able to come in and play from day one. That's why I wasn't a big fan of the Springer pick last year either, because that's like a down the line type of thing. But I think the Sixers need a guy who's able to come in and make an instant impact right away.
Yeah, no, totally. And I think they're going to teeter on that line here is, BPA. Are you going to go take the guy that's the best player on the board at 23 or someone that you think can fit and play right now, plug right in? A guy that I think falls right in between that is one of my favorite guys that we have on this list. It's Dalen Terry. So I'm interested to hear what you guys have to say.
Love Dalen Terry. This is probably my pure just from like a favorite to watch. He's probably number one on my list. Just a guy that brings it every single night. The numbers don't look great when you just pop off the chart, but I don't think they fully represent what he brings to the table. Stands 6'7", 7-foot wingspan, 19 years old out of Arizona, average 8 points, 4.4 rebounds, or 4.8 rebounds, 3.9 assists, 1.2 steals, and shot 36.4% from three. He was a guy overshadowed by a very talented Arizona team. Benedict Matherin's probably pretty much a lock to be a top 10 pick, a guy who I also like a ton in this draft. Christian Coloco also in the first round range. He's probably teetering on the downside lately, but two guys that are very high pedigree college players that Dalen Terry was more of a complimentary piece to, but he did his role in the offense well. He shot it when he needed to, and he's just a guy that does the little things. He will slap the floor, clap in your face, bring the intensity on every single possession. He would immediately change the motor of the Sixers team just from being there, being the impact. He's not afraid to pick up full court, get in a guy's face, and I love everything that he brings, and I think there's a ton of untapped potential with his game as well.
Yeah, the most intriguing thing to me with Terry is that he's just a flat-out, like, athlete. Like, the Sixers really are lacking in that regard. Like, James Harden, not much of an athlete. Tobias, all right. Like, Danny Green. This team needs to get more athletic, and they need more, like, playmaking potential out of these athletes, be able to get out in transition. And just like you were saying, Sean, like, add just some, like, flair and some intensity to this team, because I think in a certain regard, that's kind of what they're lacking. You look at even like a guy like Matisse, where he brings that energy and that defense. He might not be here, and he's not an impact on the offensive end of the floor. I think Terry could give you a little bit of both on both sides. So that's why I think he would be a really good fit here.
Yeah, I love Dalen Terry. I think he's, we're going to talk about our top three later. He'll probably be making an appearance on my list there. I hope that he's there at 23. I think, what you guys talk about fit, perfect. The energy, Sean, like you mentioned, I think is a massive upside and something that doesn't get talked about enough when talking about him. You kind of see shades of like a small forward version of Scotty Barnes, like a less, like less of a four, more of a wing. I like what he does in transition. I like what he does with the ball in his hand. He's a good passer, great athlete, like you mentioned, Ryan. He seems like a great teammate, a guy that just is all over the place, is going to, uplift everybody. I love it. I think as a shooter, it's there. He can, he's shown improvement consistently. I like him a lot. I think he's going to be the steal of the draft if he falls that late. He's one of the guys that I think is going to be looked back upon. He mentioned this before. He's going to be a steal. I think he is. So I hope he makes it to 23. Yeah,
he's not shy for confidence. He's talked pretty highly of himself, which I love to see, and a guy that's been very much a riser in the draft. He was kind of pegged as a pretty much second round pick for a good part of the process, which kind of like the numbers indicate. Like he doesn't pop off the page when looking at the stats, but he's a guy like you watch the film and he absolutely brings it. So cool to see him rise up to the point where I'm not sure he's going to be at the board for the Sixers, where there was an earlier stage of this process where I was thinking he was a potential move back target. So cool to see him get some notoriety. I would love for him to end up in Philly.
Sorry, Ryan. I thought you were going to go. So this is another guy that, we've talked, again, Arizona, super talented team. We're going to look here at, I don't even know how to really pronounce his name. Ochai
Agbachi.
There you go. He got the pronunciation down. So this is a really intriguing player, right? Kansas, one of the best teams the best team in the country. He kind of fades here and there, in terms of numbers wise, because he's playing on a super talented team. Sean, how do you feel about this prospect?
Yeah, I think he's being slept on across kind of NBA circles. This is a guy that pretty much checks exactly what you're looking for in a 3-and-D prospect. There's a little bit of concern with kind of the athleticism. He's a weird athlete in terms of he will go up and throw down like a highlight reel lob and get vertical, and then He doesn't move particularly well laterally. He's not great at like creating separation, doesn't have a particularly good burst. There's an aspect of me that like kind of thinks he underperforms defensively in terms of like he should be a better like impact player on that side of the ball than he is. But like offensively, this guy, he's high usage, high rate, shot over 40% from three on 6.5 attempts per game. He pretty much does whatever you want. He can create with the ball in his hand, moves well off ball, catch and shoot. He's pretty much a perfect plug and play 3-and-D guy. Would be awesome if he's still on the board at 23. But I think he likely goes over, but I would love him.
Yeah, I think personally he's definitely going to be gone. I did my mock draft earlier yesterday. I'll be recording that tomorrow, but I had him definitely in the lottery. It might have even been top 10. I think he's just one of those guys, like I was saying with Liddell, like top 5, like safest players. Like, you know what you're getting from him. He's going to rebound and he's going to shoot the 3 ball and he's going to defend at a pretty high level. You can't really count on him for playmaking. The most assists he ever averaged in his time at Kansas was only 2. So he's not going to be much of a playmaker, but just like you were saying, a plug and play type of guy, able to shoot the ball and defend. That's as safe as it really gets in today's NBA, especially at 6'5", and he's got a real muscled-up frame as well, so he's going to be able to hold his own physically. So that's what really intrigues me about Agbachi, and he was Kansas's best player from start to finish this year, the national champion, so that accounts for something in my book as well.
Yeah, I totally agree with you both. I loved what I saw from him over the time that I spent watching his tape. He is high volume, high efficient shooter, really solid plus defender. You know, what more can you ask from a guy that's probably going to slide into your 2 or 3 spot? He's got good length. He's, switchable, high IQ defensively. The only thing you can really say about him is he's fairly timid attacking the rim and doesn't have a great handle. But, as a player that's going to be plugged in that 3-and-D role, not going to be asked to do much playmaking or self-creation, and he's just going to lock down, the opposite wing. So I love what I saw from him. Like you guys said, probably not going to be there, but if he is, that's a great pick. And, one of the ones that you just can't pass up because like you said, Ryan, one of the safest players in the draft, he's going to be a good shooter and a good defender, so that's all you can ask from a guy like that. And he'd be a perfect fit in Philadelphia as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I would have no complaints with him being there. Another guy that's interesting to me is kind of Christian Braun, who also from Kansas, another guy that I think is underrated. I think both these Kansas guys are not getting kind of the notoriety they desire. The thing that's appealing to me about Christian Braun that I like outside of Agbachi is Braun is going to be the exact same role that he was in college at the NBA level. He's a guy that's a sneaky athlete, a decent shooter, willing to do the little things. He competes hard. I think he's a better defender than he gets credit before. This is a guy that to me is another plug and play role player. I think both the wings on Kansas are guys that are going to project very well at the NBA level and do their job at a very high caliber. So both those guys are very high appeal to me. I also think like Braun's perceived as a guy like a notch below pretty much all these other guys we're talking about. And I don't think that's proper either. I think he deserves to be right in the conversation with all these guys. And I'm curious to your guys' thoughts on him.
Yeah, I think if you like Dalen Terry a lot, you should like Christian Braun a lot because I think they bring a lot of the same things to the table. What we were talking about with Terry's like energy and just effort towards the game, Christian Braun is constantly doing that as well. Watching him, he's a big face clapper, floor slapper. He kind of does all that stuff, and I think he even shoots the ball a little bit better than Terry. He shot 38% this year. But he shot 44% as a freshman, and I think his role mainly as a freshman was kind of just to be that spot-up shooter, which over these last 2 years, Kansas relied on him more. He's getting more defensive attention. He's having to take tougher shots, and I think that might have caused his overall field goal percentage to go down a little bit and his three-point percentage. So I think in the NBA, he's actually going to be closer to that like 42, 43% from deep because he's just going to be relied on to be a floor spacer. But he can also, like I've said before in my mock drafts as well, he's a guy who's going to be able to go up and throw it down. He has really good athleticism. I think he gets a little bit slept on because he might be a white wing. So, but he rebounds the ball pretty well. But like we were kind of saying with Agbachi, not much of a playmaker. But I think this is actually who I mocked to the Sixers, so that would be a perfect fit for me, and I'd be really happy if we came away with Braun.
Yeah, I mean, again, I agree with all the things that you guys have said. When you talk about the dog mentality, he's a guy like that. I like the energy that he brings. Not a sneaky athlete, just a regular one, just a real life athlete. He can compete at the NBA level as an athlete. I hate to be the one that compares like to Grayson Allen. But you see like the impact that like Grayson Allen can have on a playoff team, the way that he did in Milwaukee. I think that's like the role, right? Coming off the bench, just super solid, both ends of the floor, both offensively and defensively. He can attack a closeout. He might put you on a poster. He might punch you in the mouth. That, he's that type of guy. So I really like Braun as well. I think there's like we talked about, a lot of good options in this area. And I'm hoping they come away with like one of the 7 guys that I really like at that spot.
Yeah, and to touch on the comp there, like I think I like Christian Braun better than Grayson, both from a person aspect and on play aspect. I think Braun, there's more to him athletically. He's a little bit bigger than Grayson Allen. Allen's probably a slightly better shooter, but I think there's just more that Braun can do in terms of rebounding, getting in the mix. He's a guy that does the little things, which another thing that needs to be kind of prioritized more for the Sixers than I think it should for the typical NBA team, because that's just been something they're missing. Like, he's a guy not afraid to put his body on the line, lay it all out there, and I love that. I think he'd be a perfect plug and play mix for that, and pretty good comparison. But I think there's a little more to Braun.
I think that he would be like a fan favorite too from day one, just because like he's a guy who really loves to play hard and feed off the energy from the crowd. Like, I could see him having a 3 or some crazy dunk and like a timeout, and then cameras on him. He's pumping up the crowd and everything. He's just a guy who I think would bring a lot of energy and fit really well in Philadelphia. Yeah,
definitely agree with that as well. So this is a guy. So there's a lot of talk around. There's a lot of hype around certain players. Here's a guy that I don't think has gotten a lot of like notoriety coming into this draft, and something kind of surprising in a way that we've seen the G League Ignite players almost go completely under the radar. I guess not a lot of people are watching the G League compared to college basketball. But MarJon Beauchamp, how are you guys feeling about him?
Yeah, MarJon Beauchamp. I think I'm higher on him than the general person. He's a guy. He's gonna have people with their looking at him through the Matisse Thybulle eyeglasses and be afraid of that. I mean, it makes sense when looking at his frame. Pulling up his stats here, he shot 27.3% from 3, 6'7". The thing that appeals to me about him is, first off, like offensively, even though the numbers might be there, he asserts himself so much more than we see from Matisse. He's got a little pull-up game. He can take a guy off the dribble. He's a good cutter. He does a lot. He finds ways to make a positive impact even without having the pure shooting numbers. Very great, very well, and does very well in transition, gets out often, super active. And defensively, he plays kind of a more physical style. Like, he's got a large wingspan. He loves guarding like smaller guys and just kind of like bullying them with the ball, which is very fun to watch. I love it. Would be a terrific addition. He seems to be on the decline from like, he seemed pretty pegged as like a late lottery, early 20s pick. I see him slipping a lot lately, which, I mean, I get it. He's 21 years old, so he's not as far in the developmental process as you probably hope. It's a very unique story. A guy that took a gap year after high school to just prep for the NBA draft, went through a camp, didn't really work out, went to community college, and then ended up with the G League Ignite this year. So a very non-traditional route to the NBA, but a guy that seems to want it. He was a highly rated prospect coming out of high school. He still has that pedigree, even though he hasn't necessarily been able to show it on kind of the top tier level. And it's very difficult to gauge off the G League guys it's a unique situation where they're all kind of just purely putting on their showcase for a draft. So I evaluate it a little differently than I say I would like a college player.
Yeah, he's a prospect that kind of scares me. Personally, I would, if I'm Philly, I'm kind of staying away from this type of guy. I think they need to go for a safer thing. This is more like a swing for the fence. He's a guy who I'm penciling in, whether it's I think they might have 3. I know they have at least 2 first-round picks, but like to the Nuggets, where they take swings on these like high-level athletes and guys who are banking kind of on that potential and might maybe slit a little bit. Like, they might even get like a Patrick Baldwin type, like one of those guys who had a high school rating and then kind of faltered after that. But I don't think the Sixers are in position to take a guy like that. Like you were saying with Matisse Thybulle, like he might like resemble him with the frame and the defensive ability, but he does show that more assertiveness on offense and able to score multiple ways other than just spotting up, shooting threes. But this is a guy that personally I would just stay away from if I'm Philly. I don't think they're in the position to take a swing for a guy like this.
Yeah, I think it is a little bit nerve-wracking looking at the shooting numbers. Again, I think that there's just such a massive difference. I mean, especially in his case, coming from community college and then playing against professional players, grown men. Like, you got to look at this G League team, those G League teams through a different lens. And when you talk about guys like, certain guys are scoring 18 to 20 points per game in college, compared to guys that are scoring, 15 to 20 in the G League, like that 15 to 20 in the G League, normally is coming a lot more difficult than in college basketball. It's just the truth. Not everyone makes it to the G League. So I think I look at these guys and I see the certain struggles as like a really good stepping stone to building a good career. I like Beauchamp a lot. I understand the kind of the hesitancy, but I think he's capable of building onto that. His frame, Sean, like you said, there's a difference between what Matisse Thybulle does and what a great defender does. I like Thybulle a lot. I know we talk about it all the time, but like Beauchamp is going to muscle, bully, fight, and it's going to cause not different effects than Thybulle. He's not going to get the flashy steals and the breakaways and that stuff, but he's going to hold it down a lot better than I think Thybulle will in certain cases. So defensively, I love it. We talk about the lack of defensive wing depth in Philadelphia. He fixes that pretty quickly, like you said, Sean. 21, so not super young. I like him. I do.
Yeah, not to get too sidetracked here, but the Sixers are 100% going to trade Matisse Thybulle this offseason. I mean, the amount of like pro Matisse propaganda that's being spit out by like Keith Pompey and kind of people surrounding the team is just pretty crazy to me. Like Pompey posted the other day like his screen navigation stats and how he's the best in the league at that. Which like first off, there's just no way that's true because I've seen Matisse like die on screen so many times, and I don't even know how you accurately score that. But second off, like I think, and even in the article, like he said how Matisse is eligible for a 5-year, $186 million extension. It's like, sure, he's eligible, but like you better not be offering him that.
I'm eligible for it too.
Yeah. I definitely think there's a lot of behind the scenes work being done to hype up his value. I do think there's a team that will buy into a 25-year-old who's been on 2 All-NBA second team defensive teams already. But I do think that there will be a need for a Matisse Thybulle replacement going forward. If they find a way to buy back into the draft with a deal for him, I'm open to that as well. If it's for a win now player, I'm also open to that. But I do think that's a move in the works for the Sixers is Matisse Thybulle is on his way out.
I mean, it seems like it's kind of the writings on the wall at this point with him. I don't know, man. It's time to. It's a make or break. I feel like last season was very make or break for Matisse, and it felt like it broke. So I don't know. I think I like it. I think I like the potential of moving him, adding a player to replace his defensive help that can have a little bit more offensive upside, and who knows what may happen. A lot of time to go over things of that nature. But to move forward, Blake Wesley. How do you feel about Blake Wesley?
I have mixed feelings. He's a guy who has very much to me like the feel of like an NBA guy, but he just has yet to put the tools together. For me, he's a little bit too raw for the Sixer spot. I've seen him mocked at him a ton. Looking at his stats, he's 6'4", 6'11" wingspan from Notre Dame, 19 years old, 14.4 points, 3.7 rebounds, 2.4 assists, 1.3 steals, shot 30.3% from three. He's a hot and cold guy. He has shot creation. He has a little bit of like it factored to him, but I just don't fully buy into him putting the pieces fully together. He's a guy that, for me, 23 feels too early for.
Yeah, I agree with you in that regard. He's a guy who we're kind of taking like another swing at with his upside and his potential of what he could be. You look at a guy who I really like. He won't be there when we pick, but Malachi Branham from Ohio State. He was a player who kind of similar, like in terms of their style of play and their frame, but Wesley is a lot less efficient than Branham. But there were two guys who really improved down the stretch. They had really strong Februarys and March. And when you look at Wesley, that's when kind of Notre Dame really started to pick up. So he was kind of the guy that made them go down the stretch. So that's like an intriguing thing to me where it's like, if this guy's playing well and he's able to take over some games, that shows that I think that'll translate over to the NBA level pretty well. But he's a guy who definitely, I think, benefit from more time playing like in the G League, or he would have definitely benefited from another year at college, really being able to assert himself in the ACC and prove to be one of the guys. But he probably had to get a first round promise to come out. I just don't think he would be a good fit for us right now for what we need.
Yeah, I don't love the fit really at all, to be honest. It's just not compatible. I like his game. I like what the upside of his game is really intriguing. I said he looks a little bit like Bones Highland in the way that he, it's like the sparky kind of funky, offensive bucket getting offensive type player. But with that bucket getting style, the isolation, the things of that nature come really bad games and poor efficiency, what you've seen from him. But I like him again. I do like him as a prospect. I just don't really like the fit here. It's kind of, steps away from, I think, what the Sixers need at this point. So taking that risk and not necessarily getting a player that, even if he were to grow into a solid player, a role player, I don't know that that is a role that's super necessary with the Sixers currently anyway. So even, prior to that development, it doesn't seem to make a lot of sense to me for them to draft him.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think he's probably the most raw out of any of the guys that we have listed here. But then again, like Morey is a sucker for kind of the high end potential guy. And another guy I kind of want to get into talking about that is Jaden Hardy, another G League guy the Sixers have been mocked to a bunch. I don't know. I have my concerns about Hardy personally. He's a guy who the perception is he's purely a bucket getter. He was a top 5 recruit coming out of high school, a guy projected to be a top 5 pick going in this draft, and really things just did not go great at the G League level for him. Looking at his stats, he averaged 19.5 points, 4.3 rebounds, 3.6 assists, and 1.2 steals. But the efficiency splits were just not there. He shot 30.9% from 3 and 37.9% from the field. Shot under 50% at the rim in the half court. There's just a lot of concerns on just the efficiency of what he can get it done. He does have an interesting kind of zest to him. He's got a little bit of like the it factor, the feel. You can tell he's like a highly regarded guy, but just like, once again, it's tough because at the G League, it's a different microscope you're looking through, and it's like such a small sample size we're looking at under such a fine magnifying glass. But I don't know. I definitely have my concerns from what I saw, but I definitely could see the Sixers take him at 23 if he's still there.
Yeah, out of the 2 G League guys on our list, I probably would prefer Hardy over MarJon. 2 guys like I was talking about, I'm not really that high on either of them. I just think it's too big of a risk, and I've said it once, I'll say it again. I don't think the Sixers are in position to take a really high potential type pick. But Hardy, I think, can come in and impact the game on the offensive end, which certainly we need. So if that is a pick, it's not something I would be that upset about. But I think we have more areas of concern that we need to address. I don't think really Hardy helps fit the overall need.
Yeah, I agree. I do agree with you guys there. I think I'm a little bit higher on Hardy than the 2 of you. When I look at it, and the way that I look at it, and is if you're going to take the swing, if you're going to take the chance at 23, and maybe again when you talk about potentially trading and maybe acquiring some extra draft capital, maybe if you like him there, and you could potentially get your next safe pick, like. I like it. Hardy is a guy that when you talk about his upside is, to me, significantly higher than a guy like Wesley. A similar play style, that kind of thing, where if you're taking that swing, that's the one you want to hit on. Whereas like he has the potential, I think, is much higher with him. The ceiling is higher. The floor may be the same level of low where he doesn't end up working out. Enticing player, but like I mentioned, the G League changes a lot. You talk about the inefficiencies, the shots don't come as easy. When you go back and watch his high school tape, it's like he's putting guys on posters, 6'5" centers and 6'6" centers, and it's like you're going up against real life shot blockers, centers that have played, at multiple levels. I don't know. I think if you're going to take the swing, Hardy's the guy to take the swing on. I'm not necessarily saying that is the pick. He's not in my top 3 guys here. But potentially, when you think about it, it's enticing a little bit.
Yeah, it for sure is. I mean, he has the notoriety. He has the pedigree. Yeah. Like, he has a lot of, I for sure could see Morey pulling the trigger on him because kind of similar to what he has done with Maxey and Springer these past 2 years. It's just purely, the highest ranked guy that falls to him, even kind of regardless of fit. Springer obviously was not really the fit the Sixers need, a guy that I still believe in the long term, and I was cool with at the time. I'm still cool with now because I think he'll develop at his own rate. But I really don't have that same kind of patience with this pick, I feel. And especially when we're talking about the Sixers need wings so desperately, and that's really not what Hardy does. Yeah. So in the effect that we would kind of be passing on so many of these guys that could bring more of an impact defensively and guys that are more ready right now, to me, I just can't get on board with Hardy at that.
That is the thing hanging me up. Absolutely is the fit, that conversation. So I understand why, he's not as high. I'm saying, when you think about the potential, he's the guy if you're going to take a swing. So to go into a guy that, is much less of a risk, and a guy that I do like, Kendall Brown. How do you guys feel?
I wouldn't say less of a risk is fully the way I would word it. Still a guy.
Maybe a little.
Yeah. Still incredibly raw. A guy I like a whole lot. I could get way more on board with Kendall Brown. I'm a fan of his game. He interesting kind of story. So he went to Baylor. He was the number 10 ranked recruit. Jeremy Sohan was the number 90th ranked recruit. Sohan basically outplayed him in a very similar kind of style, those two. Sohan's going to end up somewhere in the top 10 range, probably a little farther in the top 15, I would say pretty confidently. But he's a guy that they're similar in the fact that they're both versatile defenders, can defend just about every position. For Kendall Brown specifically, he's a guy who the offensive side of the game is what still beats desired for him. Looking at his stats, he only averaged 9.7 points per game, 4.9 rebounds, 1.9 assists, shot 34.1% from three, but only on 1.2 attempts per game. He definitely looked a little hesitant when eyeing up his shot, and there are some somewhat concerns with the shooting stroke. But with all that being said, just the versatility he is, the high level athlete that he is, he would be raking up dunks on lobs from James Harden that I think would absolutely fit. And Terry in transition, a guy that makes his presence felt. I think that he would be going significantly higher if it wasn't for Sohan. I think they were too similar that it kind of they didn't look great together in that regard. And I think that there's more to be untapped that we weren't able to see. So I like Kendall Brown a whole lot.
Yeah, Brown for me kind of fits into that Dalen Terry mold where he's a really athletic wing, and that's what Philadelphia needs desperately. They just need more athletes. You look at them a lot of times this year, they're just a slow team, and most of their damage done in the half court on the back of Joel Embiid. You had a guy like Kendall Brown that's able to get, Tyrese Maxey, James Harden pushing the ball, getting it up the wing, and Kendall Brown finishing in transition. I think that would be a really nice fit, and length, defensive versatility. All those are the words that you like to hear in wings, and he has all that to him. So I'm a big fan of Kendall Brown. He's another guy who I think it might be more of an upside pick, but I think he can, while working on that offensive game, impact the game on both the defensive end of the floor and out in transition. Just in the half court right now, he's kind of in the Matisse mold where he's kind of, you don't really know what you're going to be getting from him on a night in, night out basis.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I like Kendall Brown because of, the increase in athletic ability right off the bat with him. It's actually surprising. You talk about a sneaky athlete when we talk about Braun. He's a sneaky athlete. Kendall Brown is an actually sneaky athlete. He jumps and his head's at the rim almost immediately. It just looks weird sometimes. But yeah, athletically, he is ready to plug and play right now. He can keep up with any of these NBA players. Really versatile defender. He's a good cutter, Sean. Like you said, transition, he creates so many opportunities. I think that's something that's unspoken about guys that are really good in transition. It's not always the guys that get the ball, but he's going to attract so much attention. And a similar, I'm trying to think of a good not as big as John Collins, but the way that John Collins is going to put you on a poster at some point, Kendall Brown has that ability as well. And guys, look out for that. I think that's something that goes unspoken as a transition defender. That's not something that people don't notice. When someone's going to put you on a poster, that's noted at the beginning of the game. He's going to do that. I like that as well. The lack of confidence, it's just a slow shot. I think he's going to be okay as long as he can speed it up. I don't know. It doesn't look great. It doesn't project great. But, you look at guys like that, Grant Williams turned himself into a really good shooter. If you can learn how to shoot from the corner, you can make, you can make a lot of difference there. And if he can become efficient from that space, it's a pretty big if. But you love the high floor that a versatile defender and good athlete gives you. He checks those boxes.
Yeah, and you can make a lot of money too if you defend. If you're 6'6" plus, defend and are able to shoot 38 to 40% from three, you're going to be in the league for at least 12 years. You're going to be making over $100 million. So I'm not sure why more guys don't just focus on that end of the floor.
Yeah. No, definitely. The corner three has become such a key part of just about every offense in terms of there has to be a guy that's just content sitting there and being comfortable with that shot. Kendall Brown specifically, I see more of kind of a dunker spot role for him, at least in the short term when he gets in the league, which there's still a spot for that. Doc Rivers obviously loves the dunker spot, loves utilizing that as well. So, I do think he's a guy that can make an impact there. And for him specifically, 19 years old, there's still a lot to be developed. He's earlier in his trajectory, which I think is in the positive side of things for him. And also he's the level of athlete that would make such a splash on this roster and immediately felt kind of in the way, remember when Charlie Brown Jr. made his debut and it was whoa, what's this? This guy can run around and do things quickly. Kendall Brown is
rebound.
Yeah. Kendall Brown's an even higher level athlete than that. And I think that alone makes him an immediate impact player if he can, of course, get some minutes.
Yeah, and I think alongside of that, when you talk about the fit, like with a guy James Harden, the passer that he is, and the attention that the other big would draw, like you can play Brown at the 4, and I think he provides a lot in that spot. You talk about the dunker, you talk about as like a secondary pick and roll guy, lob threat. There's chances for him to make an offensive impact with really not having to shoot very much at all as he grows into that form of player, that archetype of player. Maybe there's a lot there to see. I like it. There's a lot of these guys that I just would not be disappointed at all if they ended up in a Sixers uniform. He's one of them. Here's a guy that I think is maybe a little bit up and down between guys that are talking about the Sixers draft spot this year. I know that our boy Tiago loves him. Jake LaRavia, how are you feeling?
Yeah, Tiago does love him. He has him higher than Tari Eason, which I think is a little bit of a crazy take. Tari Eason, who I don't think is going to be there on the board. So,
yeah.
But to talk about Jake LaRavia, I don't know. I get the appeal for him. For me, so I think the biggest need when breaking down what the Sixers' needs are, I look at the defensive side of the floor. I think having a guy that's versatile, that can switch, do that, that's not what Jake LaRavia brings. And he projects well when you look at like the analytics, 1.7 steals, 1.0 blocks, shot 38.4% from 3 on just 2.3 attempts per game. He went to Indiana State for 2 years, then transferred to Wake Forest this year. He's a little bit betweener in terms of like a wing and a forward. I think he probably leans more toward kind of the stretch big kind of positional outlook, but a guy that like needs a rim protector there still. He's not a perfect fit in my mind. I mean, he does a lot, but there's a lot of like I just have concerns. Like he's definitely a complimentary piece, but like what exactly is his NBA role is I guess my biggest concern with him.
Yeah, he's a big question mark for me. He's a guy like I really didn't even hear much of, and I like to think I watched enough college basketball where I would have heard about him. I didn't really start hearing about him until a few months ago, like once we really started getting into draft scouting and whatnot. But an intriguing thing with him for me is, like you said, Sean, transferring from Indiana State to Wake Forest, he like improved like in all his numbers for whether it's field goal percentage, 3-point percentage, a little bit more rebounds. He even improves like playmaking with his assists a little bit. So he's a guy who might not be like tapped out in terms of potential wise. He got a little bit better. But like I feel like he would be playing kind of the same like role or at least like minutes that like Georges Niang would be bringing. And I don't know like how much better he really is than like a Niang. So is this a guy who might just be, we pick him here and then he's kind of stuck on the bench or he's down in the G League? Like, it's just too much of a question mark for me as of right now. There's other guys on the list that we've talked about that I'm much higher on.
Yeah, I think I agree with both of you in that sense. I like him as a shooter. He's not just a catch and shoot guy. He can do a lot with and without the ball. Low effort jumper, like very replicable. You can do it over and over. It's there are a lot of things that I do like. Ryan, to your point, Georges Niang is, that's the position that he'd be fighting minutes for. Defensively, I think there's a little bit more to like from LaRavia if you're comparing him directly to Niang. He guards well in the post. He's a mature and like smart defender. He makes up a little bit with his lack of athleticism. Like the lateral quickness is just really not there. Something that like when you think about Luka Garza, I know Garza's bigger and much more oafy than LaRavia is, not nearly as fluid athletically. But the reason Garza fell so late in his draft was because of the fact that he just can't keep up. And I'm worried that LaRavia, as a tweener, like you said, Sean, he's not quite a 4. But he's not athletic enough to keep up with wings in the NBA. So that tweener spot's always difficult, and those guys tend to take a little bit longer to figure things out. So why I do like LaRavia and what he brings on the offensive end, because he's also like a high IQ player, has been known to make good passes, a little bit creative in that sense as well. But he doesn't necessarily like merge that gap to the point that I think the Sixers are going to want from that pick.
Yeah, to be completely fair to LaRavia, he definitely is a significantly better athlete than Georges Niang, especially vertically. Like he can get up and throw it down a little bit. He's not the quickest laterally, but like he can get up and dunk. He can do that, and a very smart passer. 3.7 assists per game, and there were a couple like advanced reads that he'd made, like a little bit of manipulate the defense. So there is some appeal. He's also a guy that's content being effective in low usage, which is also appealing. That is kind of what the Sixers are looking for. But for me, like the defensive concerns are still there. So I agree with everything we've said here, but interesting prospect, LaRavia, for sure.
Yeah, I think he's a guy that they might like. He seems like a guy that Maury would like also. But to move into our last guy that we have on the list, a guy I'm not necessarily very high on, it's TyTy Washington.
Yeah, I'm a sucker for a Kentucky guard. I really am. I mean, I'm not gonna say I think TyTy Washington is awesome. Like, I think if we're comparing him to Maxey, which is kind of a natural comparison, I think Maxey has significantly higher ceiling, and the Tyrese Maxey that we're seeing right now is probably better than the TyTy Washington we'll ever get to. But he's got a little funkiness to him that I like. He's very good at kind of the pump fake, get to his mid range spot. Excellent in between game, which there's a lot of prospects that one of my notes for a lot of guys has been like lacking the in between, which some of that's just kind of the natural transition that basketball has become. And so at the rim or 3-point is where the shots come from. But I like that TyTy has his spots in the mid range. He's got an excellent floater, definitely the best floater in the class. I think he has like a career as kind of a tweener, either low end starter or high end bench player. And if that's what you're walking away with at 23, like I'm cool with that. If he's on the board, I think once again that's like a Maury pick that they would consider because of like he likes the value guys that kind of slip. I don't necessarily think he'll be there. I think somebody will jump on him before, but I would be all right walking away with TyTy if that's how things shake out.
Yeah, he's another guy where I kind of was talking about with Blake Wesley, where like when Wesley played well, Notre Dame played well. Like when TyTy Washington was fully healthy, Kentucky was like rolling at the beginning of the year. Then he hurt like his foot or like his heel, and it just kind of bothered him throughout the rest of the season. He was in and out of the lineup, and that's where you kind of saw Kentucky start to struggle and then eventually lose to St. Peter's. So when he was healthy and he was playing well, he was one of the better guards in all of college basketball. I'm a big like fan of his personally. I have him going number 10 actually to the Wizards because I just think they need a guy who can come in and run the point for them right away, and I think he can do that. But I don't think that would be a smart investment there by the Sixers just because of the Springer pick last year. Then you also have Tyrese Maxey who can play the one. You're going to have James Harden with the ball in his hands a lot of the time. I just don't really see a role for him with Philadelphia right now. And like I've said throughout the thing today, we need somebody who's able to come in and make an instant impact. I just think we have too crowded of a backcourt right now, especially if we're keeping Springer in the conversation. And if I don't know what the situation with Shake's contract is, I've saw going to get picked up, not going to get picked up. But if it does get picked up, he's going to be back and getting minutes again. So just too crowded of a backcourt right now for me to take another point guard.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, same boat. When you think about this draft, and Sean, you mentioned it earlier, we talked about Hardy. Like, it would be disappointing for them to not come away with one of the guys that, fits almost exactly the bill that they're trying to, complete this roster with. Athletic, defensive, versatile wing. TyTy Washington is definitely not that. He has a lot of good qualities. He does a lot of things well on the court. Extremely quick. Like you said, Sean, getting to his spots. He does a really good job in the mid-range floater game. It's built into that Kentucky guard archetype. So I like him. I like his game. I just don't think. But he's also a guy that talent-wise at 23, like you said, Sean, like if by whatever means he ends up there, would I be miserable if they took him? Definitely not. He has the talent. He has the upside there. But I don't think that's really plausible at any rate.
Yeah. No, I agree. I'm going to throw one more at you guys. I'm sorry. I know I didn't send this name out, but Wendell Moore is another guy I want to bring up from Duke. Another interesting story there, a guy who was projected as a very highly rated recruit and expected to come in, make an immediate impact. Really wasn't the case. He's kind of been a complimentary piece his whole 3 years at Duke. He shot 21% from three as freshman, up to 30% as a sophomore, and all the way up over the 40% mark this year. So incredible improvement in that regard. I think he kind of found his stride. I think the people that are fans of Wendell Moore believe that there's kind of more that hasn't been tapped in because of what a highly rated recruit he is. I don't necessarily think that's the case, but I think the player that he's become is still a useful guy. And when we talk about players that kind of translate, like playing their same role in college to the NBA, that's kind of what I envisioned for him too. So I think he's a guy that I think like I would feel more comfortable with if the Sixers move back a little bit to get, but another guy that I think's a fairly high floor and could step in and make an impact.
Yeah, when just to add one more thing about TyTy, if like somebody was interested in like a Jaden Springer and then Danny Green and maybe pick 23, and then we moved maybe up a little bit and we were able to get TyTy with like a combination of those guys, that's something I would be open to. In terms of Wendell Moore, though, he's a guy don't have that much on. I think he was overshadowed at times a bit at Duke at some of those higher ranked recruits. But he's a guy where I think when you look at some of these players who play at these like high level schools like Duke, UNC, Kansas, where you're going to have like your one or two top level guys taking most of the shots. But then like like we were saying with Grayson Allen, like he was a really good player at Duke, but he kind of fell in the draft because he wasn't at the top of the top like a Zion Williamson. But he's came and he's made a really good impact in the NBA. So I think Wendell Moore could fit in that regard as well.
Yeah, I think of him. He kind of, to me, reminds me of the mold of like the Villanova players that come out and are just solid. He's not going to be much more like, I know that what you said, Sean, a lot of people think there's more, think he can build on some things. And, he absolutely can. There's going to be improvements in his game. He seems like that type of guy. It was proven during his time at Duke, seeing how much he improved during those times. But he's a guy that I like the floor. The knock on him is that the ceiling isn't that high to me. But I like what he does. I like what he brings as a shooter, as a wing defender. He's a guy I think projects very well in that 3-and-D space. So I would have no problem with that. I think he's been a guy that has he been rising, and what I've seen, I feel like he's kind of been, maybe it's just Scotty talking about him on Twitter, but it's always
he's always in it for the Duke guys for sure. He's a guy. Wendell Moore, I think, is one of the more kind of all over the board prospects I've seen. I think there's teams that value him fairly highly, and I think there's teams that don't look at him as more as like a mid-second round. So interesting to see where he ends up. He's a guy that I think is going to probably, I'm the least certain about kind of where his range is, but I think I personally would feel comfortable if the Sixers were kind of in like the move back to like the early 30s territory and draft him there is kind of where I value him at.
Yeah, I could see that as well, and that's definitely a possibility. The Sixers have a lot of options here. Obviously, we've kind of just broken down, what is that? Probably close 8 or 10, however many it was. And I liked most of them. So before we close this out, let's talk about our top 3. So, Sean, out of the prospects we talked about at this 23 spot, who are your top 3?
All right, I'm going to go my number 1, Dalen Terry. I just love him, and I think he brings it. I think he makes an immediate impact. EJ Liddell is my number 2, just because I think the fit is too clean. Just so much to like about it. And I think I'm going Christian Braun as my number 3. I think that's like a comfortable high floor. All guys that I think would be able to step in and play right away, which to me is very important about this pick. So that's how I would rank my top 3.
Yeah, my whole thing throughout the podcast has been instant impact, and I have 2 of the same guys as you, Sean. I'm actually putting as my number 1 guy. I'm throwing in Ochai Agbachi there. He's my number 1. Like I said, I don't think he'll be on the board when we get there. If he falls to 23, I'd be very happy with that. Liddell would be my number 2. I really just like what he brings to the table and his overall fit with the Sixers. And Christian Braun is my number 3. Really like his athleticism, ability to shoot the ball, and I think he's going to be able to shoot the ball even better at the NBA level just as a floor spacer.
Interesting. I love those. I think I'm going to go Dalen Terry as my 1, Agbaji for my 2, and Liddell at my 3. But I think, again, like there's a lot to like for a lot of these guys, and I think the Sixers have a chance to make the right pick. That out of any of these probably 8 guys, they have a really good chance to make the right pick. Even it doesn't matter who it is at that point. Walking out of this with one of these impact players would be fantastic. So I'm excited. I don't know about you guys.
Yeah, definitely. I really hope they keep the pick. I know I think it's probably more likely than not that they trade it. I think it would be a mistake to walk away from this draft without adding at least one player, because I think there's just too many guys that fit exactly what they're really looking for.
Yeah, and I saw some stuff about some of the teams are trying to like sell some picks in the second round. Like if one of these guys where we do wind up getting one of these instant impact guys at 23, and we see a guy with some potential, like a guy who I'm kind of intrigued at, and I see him kind of all over the place, is Jovic, the guy I think he's from Serbia, I believe. Yeah. But just like his combination of size and skill, that's someone who intrigues me if he fell down to like the 40s, 50 area. And even that podcast I did a few weeks ago on some underrated guys, if they start to fall down towards the 50s, maybe we can go in and slide in one of those and take a swing on one of those guys. I'd be really happy with that if we're able to get more than one guy out of this draft class.
Morey wants to, right? Morey's always cooking up something up there. And there's a lot to go on here still. I think the Sixers are in the market to get a guaranteed impact player immediately. So trading that 23 pick, you see how much value the 26 pick had when you talk about the Christian Wood trade. Sean, I know you're not a big Christian Wood guy, understandably, but still a big name, still a big trade. And that was, headlined by the 26th pick, really. So the 23rd pick might have more value than some people think, because there's a lot of impact players here that are able to get drafted in that range. It's a deep draft of strong role players. So I think it could go either way. I don't know if I'm more in the boat of trading it or keeping it, but I think that there's good options either way. So I think we can close it out here. We've been going close to an hour. A lot of draft stuff here. Definitely stay tuned because there's more draft stuff coming. So if you want to stay tuned with Sean, you can follow him at Sean_Barnard1. You can follow Ryan Coyle. Do you have a personal Twitter?
Yeah, at Ryan Coyle 35.
And then at Beef Up Front as well. Make sure you check out the podcast. And you can follow me at JSpring17. You can follow the pod at Pick Swap Podcast. Make sure you get us anywhere you get your podcast, iTunes or Spotify, and check out the YouTube when you get the chance as well. We appreciate it, guys, and we'll talk to you next week.